Over to you, Joe.
Hi everybody. So my name is Jo. I am the Arts Heritage and Learning Coordinator at West Horsley Place. And I'm gonna show you around a little bit today. I'll tell you a little bit about our history. And there's something that lots of people know about West Horsley Place. Has anybody watched BBC Ghosts? Yeah, I can see a few nods. So we are the filming location for BBC Ghosts as well, and so you might recognise us as Button House. And we've got a few props that I'll show you on the way round for Ghost fans. But we will try focus on the history. Does that sound okay? Fab. So let me turn my camera around. So here we are. This is West Horsley Place. West Horsley Place is a manor house. The Can you see that okay? I can't see any of you guys anymore.
Yeah, we can see that. We can see the house.
Cool. So the manor house, the oldest wing of the manor house is this side, and it dates from 1425. It looks much newer than it is. So hidden behind this brick facade is a timber framed building, and you can see some evidence of that. I'll show you through the window in a minute. And so we know that there has been a site of importance here for over 1,000 years. But the oldest wing of the currently standing building is this one, which is 1425. We know that there is a ghost wing. So there was a wing that came out of the house on this side, which has come down now. So the manor house is grade 1 listed, and then we've got 8 grade 2 listed buildings on the site as well, including these little dog kennels. So there's 2 dog kennels. There's one here, and there's one over here. And they were put in the 1800s by a family, the Curry family, for their deer hounds. Emily Curry, she wrote in her diary that they were for 2 wolfhounds who didn't like each other very much, so they were on long chains that didn't quite meet in the middle. And when somebody came to the front door, they would bark very loudly, and everyone would know you were here before you knocked on the door. Good security feature. So the manor house now is owned by the West Horsley Place Trust, and the trust was formed in 2017. Mary, Duchess of Roxburgh, she died. She was 99 years old when she died in 2014. She left the house to Bamber Gascoigne, who you might recognise the name from University Challenge. And he was the first presenter of University Challenge. So he inherited the house, complete surprise, had no idea that she was going to leave it to him. And when he toured around the house for the first time, having owned it, he'd actually only ever been in three of the rooms before. And so it was quite a shock to him. It was him who, he had a survey done, and they said there's £10 million worth of repair work to be done to stabilise the building and make it a safe space for people to visit. And so what he did was he decided to create the West Horsley Place Trust. And the vision of the trust is to welcome people and support their well-being through arts, heritage and nature activities. And he had his survey done, £10 million with repair work. So the first couple of years of the trust life was repair work to stabilise the building. The facade actually over here was falling away from the building. They had to redo all of the lights, all of the electricity, all the plumbing, all of the put in a new fire suppression system. They put in public toilets, fire exits, all sorts of things like that. To make it a safe and welcoming place for people to come visit. But we are still on Historic England's at-risk register, so there's still a lot more work to be done. And over the next few years, we'll see some major fundraising for the roof. The roof's not in a very good state at the moment, and so that needs completely kind of reworking to stabilize it over the next few years. Now we're going to go inside now. Unless anyone has any questions about the front of the building. So I should mention, I mentioned it's a timber frame building and it's hidden by this beautiful red brick facade. Bamber called it a glorious sham. And through this window over here, I don't know if you can see that, but there is a wooden post there. And so that's evidence of the timber frame building that's hidden behind. When they put the facade on, it was very much about making the building look to the most current styles and fashions. So you'll recognise the style from the Queen's House in Kew. Lots of people at that time were knocking buildings down and totally rebuilding them. But we're lucky that Carew Riley, in about 1650, he didn't have enough money to totally knock down the building and rebuild. So he just built the facade on the front, which means that we have got this much older, rich history behind it. So let's go inside. So we've got the stone hall here. The house gets used for lots of different events and activities. So we're currently in the process. We had a party yesterday, which is what the tables were for. And then this afternoon, we're going to reset for our fans and family open days, which will be on Tuesday and Thursday this week, really celebrating ghosts and having activities for children. So this is our stone hall. If you do watch Ghosts, you might recognise it as the common room. And they put in a big wood panelled wall on this side, and they also build other sets in here. So this so this room, we often talk about the fact that King Henry VIII, he owned West Horsley Place twice. So he must have liked it a lot in order to own it twice. The previous owner died owing the crown a lot of money, and so he came into ownership of it upon the death, upon their death, and he gave it to his cousin, a man called Henry Courtenay, and Henry Courtenay was a Catholic. To say thank you to King Henry VIII, Henry VIII was invited for lunch here and served a 37-course lunch, and all sorts of different foods. So some things that we eat now today, like jelly and blancmange, but also some more unusual items like swan and stewed sparrows. The pistachios were included on the menu. Right now today we would just pop down to Waitrose or Tesco's or wherever and buy a packet of pistachios. But back then, pistachios aren't grown in this country, of course. And so back then they would have had to have been shipped from South America, and they would have gone on a months long journey to make it here. So very, very grand lunch, very expensive foods that were prepared for the king. And it would have been in this space, in this hall, that lunch would have taken place. Obviously, it's been redecorated and changed a lot since. It's even likely that the floor has been replaced, but this is kind of the building that would have taken place in. So Henry Courtenay, he was a Catholic, and he was actually quite high in line for the throne. At that time, and so it was only a few years later that Henry VIII ordered that Henry Courtenay was beheaded, and supposedly he was singing rude songs about King Henry VIII in the garden, and so he was arrested and beheaded, and the house came back into the ownership of King Henry VIII. It would have been on a much grander scale back then, and I mentioned the ghost wing that would have come out by the front door, and so the house would have been on a much grander scale, and it would have been kind of palatial quality. And it kind of over the years, it's actually kind of gone down in status. So now it's more like a country manor house. But at that time, it would have been incredibly grand and of a massive scale as well. And so there's an inventory from King Henry VIII And on that inventory, there's rooms like a priory and a hawking tower that are listed that we have no idea where they would have been in the building, or even if they would have been separate buildings at that time. So it would have been very grand. I will introduce you to these two portraits here. So here we have Lord Crewe as a young boy, and we have Lady Crewe as a young girl, and her name is Peggy Primrose. And so they're probably both about, I don't know, 4 in these portraits. You've got a little boy all dressed in black, very smart, with white collar and white cuffs, and a little girl in a beautiful white dress with pink sash around the middle. And so Lord and Lady Crewe, they came to own West Horsley Place in the 30s. They would have been much older than they are as shown in these portraits when they came to own the house. And so the 1930s, Peggy's actually Lord Crewe's second wife. And so he had 3 daughters and a son by his first marriage to a lady named Sybil. I can show you a picture of Sybil just here. So here we go, here's Sybil. So that would have been Lord Crewe's first wife. They had 3 daughters and a son. The son, Jack, really tragically died aged 8. And Sybil actually died a few years later as well. Took Lord Crewe quite a long time to remarry, but at that period, having an heir, someone who was going to inherit your everything that you owned, including the house, was very important. So he remarried, and when he remarried Peggy, she was actually only 19 years old, and a similar age to her to her stepdaughters. So much younger than Lord Crewe. And they had 2 children, and another son, a little boy again called Jack, and a daughter. And so I'll show you these pictures here. So we've got, this is Peggy Primrose, Lady Crewe, in a beautiful blue dress over here, and that she probably would have been about 19 in that portrait. Then we've got this bust here. This is Jack, so Lord and Lady Crewe's son. And Jack, he really sadly died at age 11. So Lord Crewe, he had 2 sons, but both of them died at a very young age. We don't actually know what they died from, but probably some kind of illness, and possibly the same illness. So that's Jack. And then we have Mary, Duchess of Roxburgh here. So I mentioned it was Mary who died aged 99 and left the house to Bamber Gascoigne, who created the West Horsley Place Trust. And so we talk about her quite a lot. She's the Duchess. And I always like to ask people to guess how old she might be in this portrait. I think she looks much older than she is. I think I'd probably guess about maybe 35, but this is her engagement portrait, and she was about 19 when this portrait was done. And you can see on her fingers here, she's got beautiful red painted nails and this huge diamond engagement ring, celebrating her engagement. She married the Duke of Roxburgh. So that's how she went from Mary Crewe Milnes to the Duchess of Roxburgh. And she would have, well, he was in the army, and he travelled around the world with the army, and she actually went with him. So they must have been quite in love, kind of following her husband around the world. And what do you do if you are a kind of upper class, relatively wealthy woman following your military husband around the world through different war zones? Well, you throw parties, and so that's what she did. She threw parties for similarly minded women and their husbands. And during World War II, she actually wrote to her mother saying that she was worried that the war was going to come to wherever it was that she was based at that time, because it was going to impinge on her lifestyle. She wasn't going to be able to throw these parties anymore. She wasn't so much worried about the death and destruction and famine that might cause, but it was very much about her lifestyle. That's what she was worried about. So she was married for many years, and then one morning in Flore's castle where they lived, she was served divorce papers on a silver platter at breakfast, and I think quite a surprise to her. Oh, I've gone. Can't see what I'm showing you.
We can see it.
Okay.
Still the portrait.
Ah, yeah, there you are. Right. So she was served divorce papers, and in Scottish law at the time, if you left your husband voluntarily, you didn't get a very good settlement, and so she didn't leave. He turned off the electricity. She didn't leave. Oh, sorry, he took away the servants first, apart from her lady's maid that she paid herself. So in this huge castle, suddenly there was nobody there to cook her dinners or to do any cleaning or anything like that. Just her lady's maid and her in this huge castle, which would have been quite a shock, very different to what she was used to. Then he turned off the electricity, so it would have been just her and her lady's maid wandering around with candles. And she still didn't leave. They were relying on, kind friends in the village to bring them up food, because it was quite a long way from the village, and there was nobody to go and do the shopping anymore. So they still didn't leave, and so he turned off the water. And at that point, it was a neighbour and a friend that suggested that actually, if there's a fire and the fire department come and they can't put out the fire because you've turned the water off, your insurance aren't going to cover it. And so he turned the water back on, not out of fear for the Duchess's safety, but I think more to do with his insurance. And so it was decided that she'd done enough, that she was definitely forced out. She got a good divorce settlement, and it included a flat on Hyde Park, which she lived in. And so that's where she lived. And then at the weekend, when she inherited West Horsley Place from her mum in the 60s, she'd come down for the weekend. And she was very much patron to the village. So she would go and she was patron of the local theatre groups. And she'd have school children come and visit and have a look around the house. And open the kind of village fair and things like that. So she was quite actively involved in the village. She loved the nature of West Horsley Place. And even towards the end of her life, when the house wasn't really in a fit state for her to stay here anymore, she would come and stay in Thatcher's Hotel on the corner, and then come down for the day. And as I say, Bamba, he'd only been in 3 rooms when he inherited the house. That was because she only really used 3 rooms, a dining room, a sitting room, and a toilet when she was here. So that's Mary, our Duchess of Roxburgh. This is her a bit older, this photograph here. And the Crewe family, so this is Crewe Hall in Cheshire. And so they kind of downsized when they came to West Horsley Place. They had properties, they had other properties in London and in Chester, and they kind of gradually downsized. But Lord Crewe, he was a politician. And let me see if I can find. There's often a portrait of the Duchess around as a young girl that was done in France, because she was. Lord Crewe was ambassador to France. And so that's where she grew up. So we're now in the library. It has this beautiful red damask wallpaper in the study area, and this would have been Lord Crewe's desk here. At the moment, we've got it's dressed with all sorts of things. You've got letters here. These are actually props from ghosts. So, my dearest Thomas, I can deny my heart no longer. You were right all along. We are meant to be together. I am ashamed that it has taken me so long to realise. Please meet me as soon as you can in the wood store at 10 a.m. And so that's actually a prop from Ghosts. And I think it's from April Fool's Day, when Alison decides to play a trick on Thomas. You've got his death day letter here as well, which are on display for people to come and see. So I mentioned the house is timber framed. So we've got these two wooden archways here, and going into the library. And these are part of the medieval timber framing of the house. And I can show you these little marks on them. So I'm just on the camera now. I'm showing you this this kind of dark black mark, and it's slightly indented. And so that is a taper burn. And there's actually quite a lot of them on these archways. And they're thought to be aparisaic marks, or witches' marks. And the thought behind taper burns, there's lots of different thinking. And because nothing was really written down at the time, it very much is kind of ideas and what we think they meant. But from kind of folklore, these are thought to be taper burns, which you expose the house to fire. So you hold a candle up for a really long time to the wood to make this kind of mark. You expose the house to fire, and that is protecting it then in the future from fire or even from lightning strikes and thunderstorms and that kind of thing. So you're protecting the house from being burned down in the future. And then there's another second witch's mark here as well. And there's only one of these. Let me just get my torch out. I don't know how well you'll be able to see it. You might just be able to pick up, there is some overlapping circles around the taper burn here. So I think on the camera you can just about make out one big circle, and then there's a couple of other circles. I'm going to try and point them out to you. So you've got a circle here, and another one here, and another one here. There's actually quite a few more, and they make this daisy wheel pattern, it's called. And that's a witch's mark. The kind of more traditional idea of a witch's mark that is to protect from evil spirits entering through the doorway. And this room would have been a dining room actually at that point, and so you're protecting from evil spirits coming into your dining room and poisoning your food. So this is the library. It's got this beautiful rich red color, and the dark colors from the books. It's a really atmospheric room. There are probably about 11,000 books in the house. There's books in nearly every room. So Lord Crewe, I mentioned earlier, and also his father, Lord Houghton, were avid book collectors. And so they collected books and in lots of their different houses, and they were all brought together to West Horsley Place. The Duchess, she recognised their book collection as important and wanted it to stay together. So rather than leaving it to Bamber with the rest of the house, she actually left the books to Trinity College, Cambridge, where Bamber and Lord Crewe and his father, Lord Houghton, both went to university. And they came and they had a look at the books. And at that time, it was estimated there's probably about 25,000 books in the house. They came and they had a look at the books, and Bamber was here and told them his vision for the house and how it be used in the future. They said, thank goodness we don't have space for this many books. Actually, what we'd like to do is leave a large proportion of the book collection with you, and we will, and knowing that they'll get good use and people will be able to engage with them. And we'll just take the ones that are relevant to us. So they only took books they didn't already have a copy of, and books that would be valuable to their library, particularly the older books in the collection. And so they did that. And then I mentioned earlier, so it was £10 million worth of repair work needed to stabilise the house when Bamber inherited it. And so they sold a lot of the Duchess's possessions, including the more valuable and important books. And so there were two Sotheby's sales of the book collection, and that was for two reasons. Was one, to raise that money that was really needed to be able to open the house up and welcome people, but also because the house in its current state is not really in a fit state to look after very important and delicate books. The windows aren't windproof, for example, and particularly at that time there were a lot more leaks in the roof. Although there are still some leaks in the roof, as I mentioned earlier, it needs a lot of work. And so not in a fit state to look after those very important books. So they were sold. We still have what we think is probably about 11,000 books in the house. But we do, unlike a lot of historic houses, we allow people to take books off the shelf. So we give people instruction on how they can take them off the shelf. They can open them up and have a look at them, which is not like a lot of other historic houses, and feels really special. Thing about West Horsley Place. And this is also one of the rooms. So in most of the rooms, we always have seats for people. And there are some chairs which we don't allow people to sit on. For instance, this chair here, which has a tape around it. And that's because they're much older and they're very fragile. And if you sit on it, you might actually end up on the floor. But most of our chairs, a lot of our seating, like the sofa here and the chairs dotted around, we do allow people to sit on. And so you could come here, you could enjoy a seat on the sofa and grab a book and have a good read. So this is our library. I'm just going to take you slightly down this corridor. So this is our toilet corridor. I'm not going to take you into the toilets, although they are fantastic. The highlight of the tour for many. And there's a beautiful fireplace in the ladies. But just in case there's any ladies in there, I'm not going to take you in there today. But this is where you can see the timber framing of the house. And so this was servants' quarters, actually, when Bamburgh inherited it. It had been put in the 60s. And so it was the place that was big enough for us to take all of that, relatively modern fabric out and leave the historic fabric of the house underneath. And now it's all on display here. You can see the timber framing and the wattle and daub walls are protected by plastic now. Yeah, and even so, this is one of the corridors. You can see a kind of older fireplace which has been bricked up, and there's an even more beautiful one in the ladies, which, as I said, I won't take you in today. But if you ever do come and visit, also worth noting. So we do have a lift, and so any visitors who come with a wheelchair or who can't manage the stairs, they can reach the first floor, which is fantastic. So in the 60s, Lady Crewe, she put that in before the house was listed, and it's actually in the oldest part of the house. There's no way we would get permission to put that in today. But so she put it in, and actually, being Lady of the Manor, she didn't ask anyone's permission. She just went ahead and did it. So she put that in when she needed it, and then the Duchess had it refurbished when she needed it later on, and then we keep it in working order, so that any of our visitors can actually go up to the first floor. So we are just about to go up the Riley staircase, which is this beautiful wooden staircase here. And this was probably put on in around 1650 when the facade was built. And we're going to go past the bear here. And so this rather large bear is, I think it must be at least 2.5 meters tall. It's significantly taller than me. It's made of polystyrene and fake fur, and it was built as a prop for ghosts. And so all the ghost fans love seeing the bear. Children do find him a little bit scary, so we often dress him up. So at Christmas he wears a Christmas cape and Christmas lights, and in the show actually he wears this fez and the monocle, and so yes, this is the bear, not a Gerard, unfortunately, according to the show. So we go up the stairs. Today I'm just showing you kind of our principal rooms. We do nooks and crannies tours. They're kind of anywhere between an hour and a half to 2 hours, where we look at we look at far more space and we give people kind of a bit more freedom to roam. So we're just looking at our principal rooms today. And this is the drawing room. And again, it's got this beautiful silk damask on the walls. And this was put up in the 18th century. Sorry, so it's 16th century silk that was put up much later than that. And we know that because it's got much more modern backing fabric behind it. And what they did was you can see this kind of patchwork pattern almost on the wall with squares of different shades of red and almost pink fabrics. And so they would have collected damask of a similar style and quality and pattern from lots of different places and then stitched it all together in this kind of patchwork. Originally, they would have dyed it all red so that it felt of the same, but then the red dye is taken differently to the fabric. And over time, in the sunlight from the windows behind me, sunlight's come through and it's bleached the fabric, and it's faded differently, and it's come up with this beautiful patchwork pattern where you can see the fabrics, the dyes taken differently to the different fabrics. This is a really good space. People ask us, so as we're conserving the house, sometimes people say, like, what era will you restore the house to? And that's something that you see in a lot of National Trust places. They pick a time period and they dress the house and tell the story only of that time period. But as I've already mentioned, I've kind of talked about the 30s. I've talked about 1400s a little bit. I've also talked about King Henry VIII. You know, we have stories that span, and I talked about Carew Riley putting on the facade. So we have stories that span 1,000 years worth of history. And so choosing one of those stories is not a direction that we intend to go in. But we will conserve the manor house. So we'll restore it, not restore it, conserve it, so that it's here for a long time into the future, and as many people as possible can come and see it. So for instance, with the damask, we might clean it and stabilize some elements of it where it's particularly broken, and you might be able to see a couple of tears in it just around this photo frame here. So we'll stabilize some elements of it so that it doesn't get any worse. And so it's here for a long time into the future. But what we wouldn't do is take it down and replace it and make it look brand new. Instead, we'll kind of just look after it. And I think if we did make it look new, it would be a huge shame, because actually, you know, history has its mark, and there's something really beautiful about the patterns that it makes, that time has made on the damask. So yes, and actually, if we were to choose a period kind of older than the 1930s, we'd actually have to knock bits of the building down, because everybody who owned the building, they did their own little bits of building work to it and changed it, and it's changed a lot over the centuries. And so that's a really interesting story that we can tell as to how the building came to the position it is at the moment. I mentioned Bamber had only been in 3 rooms when he inherited the house. He'd never stepped foot into the drawing room before he owned it, and so it would have been quite a shock if you imagine coming in and opening that door for the first time, knowing that this is a space that you own. So yes, we've got Lady Button there in the corner, so that's a prop from Ghosts as well. Many of the other paintings that are here actually are owned by Bamber's cousin, who was kind of downsizing as Bamber was upsizing to this grand house, and so he's lent a lot of the paintings to the trust for us to display. In this room, we often talk about Carew Riley. So I mentioned that in 1650, he lived here, he owned the house, and he put the brick facade on the front. And so he was the son of Sir Walter Riley. And Sir Walter Riley, he was a favourite of Queen Elizabeth I. He was actually kind of pegged to marry her at one point, but he fell in love with her lady's maid, a lady called Elizabeth Riley, or Bess Riley, she's better known, and so they kind of eloped and got married secretly. So Walter Riley, he upset. He was an explorer, and he went to the Americas, and he was given permission to go and explore the Americas on the position that on the proviso that he didn't pick a fight with the Spanish. So he went over to America, and actually the person that he was exploring with did actually pick a fight with the Spanish. So on his return, he was beheaded. And I don't think Queen Elizabeth particularly wanted to behead him because she had a bit of a thing for him. But it was perceived to be treason that he hadn't followed her instructions. And so he was beheaded. His wife, Bess Riley, bless her, paid off the headsman to have the head brought down to her at West Horsley Place. And so the head was delivered to her. She had it embalmed, and the story goes that she wore it in a bag, a red silk bag with gold trim on her skirts for the rest of her life. And when Bamber inherited the house, just here on the fireplace, and there's a little nail hidden behind the carpet there, and on that nail was hung this red silk bag with gold trim that fitted the description of the bag that Bess Riley wore her husband's head in. And we thought, oh, interesting parallel there. But there was a group in London who were putting on a theatre show about Bess Riley. And they heard about the bag, and they thought, well, we'd like to come visit and we'd have a look at it, because we were going to make a reproduction as a prop for the show. And they had a look at it. They dated the fabric to the right period. And so the bag's now very carefully looked after in a box to protect it from sun damage. And so it's possibly the bag that Sir Walter Riley would have carried his head in, would have stand in. When Bess Riley died, the question that I often ask people is, what would you do if your mum had carried your father's head around in a bag on her skirts? What would you do with the head? And Carew Riley, what he did was I get lots of different answers to this. Lots of children want to sell the head or put it on display somewhere, which is a bit gruesome. But what Carew Riley decided to do was he stored the head under the stairs for a little while. So those stairs that I came up a moment ago, they're called the Riley Stairs, and supposedly the head was stored under the staircase for a little while. But eventually it was put into the family grave, the family plot in St Mary's Church across the road. We might just be able to see the spire through the window. So there's a church just across the road over there, and that's where the head's deemed to be now. We've got the Duchess again here. So this is Mary. I don't know how well you can see that with the reflections, I'm afraid. So we're just going into the room called the Geraldine room now. And you've got these props in here. So these Apro props are supporting what is a decorative plaster ceiling. And this is thought to be the oldest decorative plaster ceiling in the country. And we know when it was put in because it was put in by Anthony and Elizabeth Brown. And I don't know how well you can see this, but there are these crests all the way around. And here you've got a oh, sorry, I put my finger in it and now it's gone out of focus. You've got a goat here, and the letters on there are AB. And here you've got Griffin. It's quite an oddly shaped griffin, but again, it's the letters are AB. And then next to it here we've got a in the centre there, it's a monkey with chains. And then you've got the letters EB next to it. So that's Anthony Brown and Elizabeth Brown. So Anthony Brown was gifted West Horsley Place by Henry VIII. And we know the year that the ceiling would have been put in because Anthony Brown, he actually died a year later. So that would have been kind of late 1500s. Yes, so Anthony Brown, he died a year later. Elizabeth Brown, the reason there's a monkey here is because she was formerly Elizabeth Fitzgerald, and this room, the Geraldine Room, was named after her, and because a poem, the poem "The Fair Geraldine," was written about her when she was a young girl. She was considered to be incredibly beautiful. So yes, it's named after her. She was a Fitzgerald, so that's a very important family in Ireland. And the always on their crest is this monkey that we've got on the crest there. Supposedly the monkey saved a baby from fire, or raised the alarm about a fire that was in the family home. And had it not have been for the monkey raising the alarm about this fire, nobody would have been able to get the baby out. So that the monkey is attributed with saving the baby's life. And so they always have this monkey on their family crest. So yes, deemed to be the oldest decorative plaster ceiling in the country. And we've got these APRO props in here just to support it until we can do some conservation work to make sure that it's here for a long time to come. But it is probably one of the major reasons that the house is listed, because it is such a beautiful ceiling. And there's plans in the British Library which show that it not only would have been here, it would have gone the whole length of the drawing room as well, when it was first put in. Unfortunately, it was too expensive to maintain, and so I can't remember which family it is, but they had it taken out, and they covered this section in here. And then it was when the Crews bought the property in the 30s, they put this bit back on display and had some restoration work done to it, so that it was in a fit state to be able to show off again. As I said, we've got books in nearly every room of the house. We've got some library volunteers who are going through and cleaning, recording, and assessing all of the books. And so you'll see there's lots that are in kind of poor condition like this. And so they're going through, and until they've made all the way through all the books, we won't know exactly how many there are. We won't know which is the oldest book in the house. Although we've got an idea of it could be, let me see if I can spot it. There's a very old book on this shelf here. I can't find it, I'm afraid. Too high up for me. I think it's one of these ones up here. That's a 16th century book. Most of them are much newer than that. But until they finish their kind of recording, we won't know exactly what is the oldest book in the house. And so we're looking forward to seeing them record and find out more about the book collection. You might notice the easels in here with books on. So if you have watched BBC Ghosts, Alison, who owns the house, she puts out books for the ghosts to read, and so we've got one book for each of the ghosts out for our family audience coming tomorrow. This is the chandelier room, and so the chandelier room is there isn't very much to say about the history other than you might recognize this archway. So this is an OG archway. Again, a kind of Georgian Strawberry Hill decorative style. There's 2 OG arches in this room. There is one other one. I don't know, can anybody remember where the other one is? When we went through the front door, there was another one. So there's only 3 in the house. So these are the arches. There's not very much to say about history of this room, but we use it to display all the ghost props. So we've got Robin's clubs here. There's an axe, a spear, and a club. We've got a set of cards, which is used in the show. The doll's house is used in the credits. And so every opening credits, you get to see the doll's house. And they use the house quite differently, and there's a different layout than kind of really does exist here. So the doll's house is a little bit different than the real West Horsley place. And we had a fundraising campaign, and we asked people if one of the prizes for donating a certain amount of money was to have your figure in the doll's house. So we've got Alison and Mike, who are actual characters from the show in the front, and then we've got a couple of other extras who've made a donation to be able to have their figures in the doll's house. And their donations will go towards the kind of restoration, conservation of the manor house. So we've got about 15 minutes left. I'm going to go down the Tudor stairs, and I'll tell you a little bit about the history then. And then the options, I've got two options for you, whether you would like to have option to ask me some questions or whether you'd like to see the kitchen. Are you still there?
I'd love to see the kitchen.
Yeah? Okay. Well, we'll do that. We'll go down the Tudor stairs and then we'll go and see the kitchen. Right, so turn the camera around. So we've got these are called the Tudor stairs. And the reason for that is because this area, it would have been a carriageway between two buildings. So we've just been through the kind of the manor house side of it, which would have been a hall house with bedrooms. And then what we're going to go and see now is the kitchen block. And in between those two different, they would have been different buildings previously, and would have been a carriageway. And when Walter Riley put the facade on the front of the building, he connected it all together so that it looked symmetrical. And so this would have been where the carriageway is between the buildings. The stairs that are here are very big for the space. They very much fill the space. And it was thought previously that they might have been brought from a different part of the house. But actually now we're kind of coming around to think that maybe they were made for this area just to fill this big space. So we've got these huge stairs. They're very narrow steps, and then there's a rather steep step on the bottom. And for Ghost fans, we've got Robin's little mouse hole here. So this is where Robin's mouse lives. And I've put this out for our family audience. And this is when Robin thinks that he's going to get sucked off, which actually means that he's going to kind of go on to the next phase of his spirit's going to move on from being a ghost. If you're not familiar with the show, so there's the little mouse hole there that they use in the show, and they do use kind of things like the mouse hole that are here. They've always been here, and then other things they fake. And so if you are familiar with the show, you might think at the bottom of these stairs we'll come to a cellar, but actually it's just a brick wall under the stairs, and they build a fake wall there with a door in, and they actually film the plague pit in the back of the kitchen where we're going to go now. So I'll just pause here for a moment. This map is really interesting. So this is a historic map of the estate, and here you've got so it gives you the idea of how big the estate is. I mean, it's not exactly what it is at the moment. So I mentioned St Mary's Church across the road is here. This is where the house is, and the estate now, it goes all the way up to the train line, which is actually further than this shows, and then and up to the Epsom Road here. And you can see how small the house is just in that big area of land. And there are parts of the house now, so this bit actually doesn't exist anymore. So that's the south wing of the house that would have been there at that time. And then this wing here, the north wing, and then this bit here, where it just protrudes out. So our morning room comes to about there, but this whole section here no longer exists. And so that just gives you an idea of how the house has changed over the time. So we're going to go this way. So this is the way to the kitchen. I'll mention, so we do have a quiet room as well. So guests who come to us on a busy day, they need to take a little bit of quiet time, and then they can go and visit our quiet room. Our kitchen's down here. And so, as I mentioned earlier, this would have been a separate kitchen building. And in Ghost, this is where they film the plague pit. And then this is the main kitchen area. So originally when this was built, it would have been a double-heighted space. And if from the outside, you can see this window that we're looking at. It goes from, it's probably about a metre and a half high from the ground, and then it goes up to the ceiling. If you're from the outside, you can see the window just keeps going past where the floor is now. And so originally this would have been double heighted, and this ceiling above us wouldn't have been there. And the ceiling was put in later. Now the servants' quarters above us. And up until probably about the 70s, this would have been used as a functioning kitchen. We still use it as a functioning kitchen today. And when we have weddings or events in the house which require catering, the caterers bring in all their stainless steel catering equipment and they put it in this space. And that's why there's this mesh netting across the ceiling. And actually today I'm stood in here and I can smell, I think they cooked fish pie in here on Sunday and I can still smell that kind of lingering in the air. And so, yes, this kitchen was used, and the Duchess, she put in a kind of very small kitchen, which we use as our staff kitchen, which was then used on the occasion that she had a meal here. We've got this is a fridge, and that's would have been bought. It would have been the latest technology in the 30s when it was bought, and it would have run on gas. And then here we've got it's not actually an oven, it's a warming cupboard. And so that would have been used to keep the food warm once it was cooked. It probably wouldn't have sat in the fireplace like that, as we don't have a stove. It fits very nicely there. It looks well. Yes, so this is our kitchen, which is a beautiful space. It gets very cold because when the trust they did the emergency repair work, the bill, the money kind of ran out, and so they put electrics into the kitchen, but they didn't put any heating in here, and so it does get very cold in here. But it's perfect space for us to run arts activities and all sorts of things like that. So I think we've still got 5 minutes or so. If you do have any questions for me.
Does anyone have any questions? Looking along the Claire.
Hello, thank you very much. That was really good. And I am a great Ghosts fan. I absolutely adore it. Sorry, let me put my camera on. Can I just ask, you say about the Ghost filming there? Is there ever been any other productions filmed there?
Yeah, there has. Enola Holmes, which was on Netflix, they did 2 films. And the first film, we are Enola's ancestral home. And actually, just because I'm here, I'll show you. Helena Bonham Carter's bedroom, Enola's mum, is filmed in our morning room, which is this space here. And this is her art studio. The drawing room also features, and one of the bedrooms, which is Enola's bedroom. And so it's used in that. And then, so the first thing that was filmed here was Harry Price Ghost Hunter. And that film production was the production that put these paintings on the wall. And so if you watch that film, you'll see these paintings kind of fill the whole space and they go all the way around. And Bamber and Christina liked them so much that they kept them. And they were given permission to keep them by a conservation officer. And so they're now part of the house, and you'll see them in other things that are filmed here. We're in quite a few things. So Mothering Sunday. We're in an episode of The Crown where Elizabeth and Philip are on their honeymoon, and they're on their honeymoon, I think in Gibraltar, and we're the interior of that house, but not the exterior. Are there any other questions?
Any more questions?
Can I ask something else? Sorry.
Yep.
You know, you've saying about people that can go into the doll's house if they make a donation. Is that still the case, or do you have to make like a lot of money donation or what?
Yeah, so our kind of, if you go onto our website, you can go support us and find it. So become a buttoneer. And there's a few different levels. So I think to get in the doll's house, it's £500. And I know at least one of the characters there, a community group all gathered together to get one figure in there. But we do have like lower amounts as well. Like having your name on the book, I think is £5, and there's a lower amount to get a copy of Thomas's letter, a replica.
Yeah.
But the details are on our website, and I'll let you have an explore and see.
Thank you.
Joe, are you sorry, can I ask? Sorry, Yasmin, didn't put my hand
Yeah.
up. Can you visit at any time, or is it only open at certain times if people want to come along?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we kind of open for specific events and activities. So once a month we have an open day. They're mostly on a Sunday. Yeah, so that's once a month, and that is kind of a self-guided tour around our principal rooms, and particularly the rooms that I've shown you today. We also have on Wednesdays are our Nooks and Crannies tours, so that's where you get to see a lot more of the spaces and hear a lot more about our history. On Fridays we have filming tours, so if you're really interested in ghosts and filming, we show people around, and nearly every space they get to go and see, and they hear about filming. And then we do arts and crafts courses as well, activities for families, evening talks. During the summer we have lots of outdoor performances, and so it's worth checking the website and seeing what interests you and taking a look. And what I didn't show you actually is we've got fabulous gardens as well. So there's 500-acre estate, and then there's the Grade 1 listed manor house. There's 8 Grade 2 listed outbuildings, most of which are kind of in a bad state of repair and need a lot of work doing to them. And then we've also got 8 acres of walled garden, including an orchard and a formal gardens as well.
Oh, I was going to ask you about the gardens, and because I saw on the website you've got a sensory garden now as well.
Yes, the sensory garden's not quite open,
Okay.
but we do have a sensory garden, and particularly that space is very much about if you for people who might be interested in the woodland on the estate. And the kind of nature conservation, we've brought lots of elements that you would be able to interact with on the wider estate all into one area. And so the bluebells that are quite a good walk from the house, and there's lots of like fallen trees that we've used to create the beds. So that's a really beautiful space. It's still a little bit in development. It also worth mentioning, so it's got it's turf paths rather than anything more substantial for anyone who's got physical access needs. But we're kind of doing as much as we can to make that flat and a steady surface. Being a Grade 1 listed building, putting paths, tarmac paths, is not very easy for us. You might be able to imagine.
Thanks, Joe. Any last questions? Can I just ask about the toilets? Do you have an accessible toilet?
Yes, we do. And so there's a disabled toilet, and then there's the ladies and the gents toilet here at the house. I don't know if I mentioned, so we have lots of uneven floors, so you can see the stone here. In the way to the toilets, there is a bit of a ramp. So there's a step on this side, and then there's a ramp, and then the toilets are through there. So we've got lots of uneven surfaces. We've got gravel out the front as well. But we do try to be as accessible as possible. And if you give us a call in advance of your visit, we can allow drop off in front of the manor house, or even parking if it's if you're the one driving, and you wouldn't be able to drive the car up and walk back again. And we can do that by pre-booking. We also have an electric vehicle, so we can bring people from the car park to the house, because our registration desk is up by by the car park. And it's about 300 meters, and some of it's over gravel, to get to the manor house.
Right. Thank you, Joe. Ted?
Can I just ask quickly, are you planning on opening now up like a little shop where you can sell little ghosts?
We do have in our welcome area where you check your ticket in, we do have a little shop there. We have a variety of different souvenirs that you can buy. A few of them are ghost themed, but not as many as we'd like because it copyright and getting the permissions. So we're kind of exploring the options. But you can buy a scout scarf and a little woggle, just like Pat has.
That's good. Ted, did you have a question? I thought I heard you.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I did actually see the accessible toilet when I was down there for doing a training session for use of your hearing loop that you've got at reception. It was quite interesting to visit you in person, and I really must go again. Yeah. Anyway, I've got to get off because I've got to go to another meeting this afternoon, and unfortunately, I'm at the beginning of this. I'll try and catch up with it on the recording, because I was in the DENS meeting earlier on, the Disability Empowerment Network meeting. So that was great what I saw. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for the talk. It was very interesting. I've lived close to you for years, but never been. So I'll come down.
Fabulous. Yeah, we'd love to see you.
Yeah, that would be good, Sam. I'm thinking the same myself. I don't live close, but I've been past it so many times, but never been in. So, anyone have any final questions before we finish? No? Well, thanks, Joe. It was really, really great. I'm sure loads of people will watch the recording as well. So thank you very much for doing that for us.